Hey everyone, Larissa here from Beekeeping Made Simple, and Happy New Year. So it's the day before New Year's Eve, not Friday, but I didn't really think anyone would log into a live video on New Year's Eve. So broadcasting from our new office room, hence the stuff on the floor and everything. But this video is about the beekeeping books I recommend and don't recommend. Real quick. It's not a lot, but there's two books that I like, and there's different things I like about each book, and all the rest I wouldn't recommend. So, there's a lot of books about beekeeping, but some of them are just like fun reads. They're easy reads. They're something you could bring and read on an airplane when you're away on vacation or sitting by the pool. And then there are things you read that look like this. And there are things that you're bookmarking information on and you're bringing maybe out to the hives or something. Though, I mean, put it in a plastic binder or something because it almost always rains on me when I'm out with the bees. So there's a lot of really nice books, Beekeeper's Bible, Hey Swarmstead, I hear it's chilly out there where you guys are. And these books are pretty and they're nice, and buy them, put them on your coffee table, read them, glance through them, whatever you want to do. They're nice. But at first, I used to recommend this book, The Beekeeper's Handbook. I don't know if anyone is familiar with this one. I used to recommend this one to my students at first, and it's got a lot of great information on it. I mean, the things that I like about it are that it has a nice chart in here about like when to treat for mites and when's not a good time to treat for mites, or at the very least to be keeping track of like what's going on in your hive in terms of pest management. It talks about offering pollination services. It gets into like a whole bunch of information. The things I don't like about it is that it is a dry read. Like this thing, you go to reference, though, to be honest, their table of contents is really lazy. Like a super lazy table of contents where I mean, it could get a little bit more detailed with this thing. But anyway, it's not very many pictures or even diagrams. It really just looks like this most of the time. And it breezes through things. It's definitely not something I would recommend to learn beekeeping. It's something to supplement the course you already took. Um, it really just kind of breezes through things. And it's not a fun read. It's not something like you want to sit there and read. It's not something you enjoy reading, but it does a pretty good job of explaining things. It's got some really helpful charts in there, some really good charts about like varroa mites and how many mites you see in your test. Like that means like with the level of infestation you have and things like that, which is really helpful to just like have in a book instead of having to always like go find somewhere on the internet. It also has, like the definitions, like this little glossary in the back, so that when you're watching videos and stuff and you forget like what mandibles mean, you can go look it up in the back. And it has some other good websites and stuff that it recommends. But the reason why I don't make this my number one recommendation anymore is because everyone was always talking about the Beekeeping for Dummies book. And, the For Dummies series of books out there, is I'm not a huge fan of the title. It always seems kind of silly, but most of the ones I've read on a bunch of different topics are pretty thorough and well written. And so this book, what I like about it is that even though it's thick and big and like a huge textbook, it actually oh wait, okay, so Swarmstead says worst book ever. Are you talking about the Beekeeper's Handbook or this one? I mean the handbook I think is pretty dry, and I would definitely go with this one now that I've read this one. And I don't recommend the other one instead. This one is at least an easier read. Like it's like someone talking to you. It's like taking a class and they're telling you like the different options, but then they also say what they recommend. And they bring up a whole bunch of random little questions in there that it just seems obvious that the person's been beekeeping a long time and probably has taught a lot of classes, or has answered a lot of questions from beginners. A couple of things I thought was really weird about there. Now, I haven't read this thing cover to cover, but whenever I do pick it up and start looking through it, I learn new things all the time. So that's another thing that I like about it, is that no matter how long you've been doing this, you can still learn new things when you start to look through it. Like in the commitment section in the very beginning, it's almost like he's trying to sell you on beekeeping, because he says that you should expect to spend 5 to 8 visits a year on your beehive. About 35 to 40 hours a year is how much time you should expect to spend checking your bees, other than your first year when he says you should be checking your hive more often just to get acquainted with the bees. And I was like, now I know that here is beekeeping year round. So but even when I kept bees in Pennsylvania, I mean, 5 to 8 visits a year, you're checking your bees? Really? Like, who's only checking their bees 5 times over the course of an entire year? It seems really low. And when you're trying to tell people, help people figure out whether beekeeping is right for them, I wouldn't go on the low end of the spectrum. I would go on the higher end, so that you're not making people think that this is a breeze and an easy hobby to get into. And with both books, one thing that I'm really disappointed in with both of them is that they just breeze through varroa mites like it's nothing. Varroa mites and actually overwintering your hives, which I have found to be the two primary reasons why people's hives collapse, is because they just didn't properly over prepare their hive for winter, or because they had a varroa mite infestation that caused the hive to collapse. And both of them are very very like low on the content. I mean, they give you like a list of things to do for winter, but it's kind of on the low end. Actually, the Beekeeper's Handbook does a little bit better of helping you understand how to insulate your hive, and they have a diagram, whereas the Beekeeping for Dummies book, I don't think does as good of a job. Varroa mites, they're both pretty poor on explaining the different kind of treatment options. They both say oxalic acid can be used, and if you don't have much or any brood present, but can be tricky. And like that's it. Now, both of these books were written a while ago. Like the Beekeeping for Dummies book, this is the 5th edition. So I bought the newest edition. You'd think that, I mean, it says copyright 2020. There should be more information about using oxalic acid, other than it can be tricky. Um, so when it comes to both of these books, if you're looking for pest management, then neither of them are going to be a huge help. They're just going to give you a general overview, and you're going to need to go somewhere else for that. And when it comes to integrated pest management techniques and ways to help your hive deal with pests naturally, they're both they both just recommend the powdered sugar over frames, and uh, you know, freezing drone comb, and that's it. So they're a little low on integrated pest management techniques as well. Um, so let me see, the Beekeeping for Dummies. I mean, it's just the author is a little bit more fun to talk to read. He like one of the chapter titles is "What to Expect When You're Inspecting," which is just kind of funny, or maybe it's just because I had a baby. It's funny that he made a joke off of that pregnancy book with that title. He has a great chapter about bees and their biology, about the hives, different kind of hive styles and the parts of the hive. The whole book, it just makes a lot more sense, and it's laid out a whole lot better than the Beekeeper's Handbook isn't laid out as well. And I think it just really breezes through a lot of stuff. He gets a lot more specific. He addresses a lot of random questions that beginners have, like don't paint the inside of your beekeeping equipment, but ways that you can extend the life of your beekeeping equipment, how to build a frame, how to put foundation in the frame. He also talks about top bars as well as line shell style hives, which I started out with top bars, and I always found it hard to find information about top bars. And there are also a few places, there are links to demo videos that you can go to online. So that's really helpful that you're not just looking at the book, but that there are some videos you can look at. There's a couple color photos in this center, but not really much. Other than that, it's just black and white diagrams in both of these books. And then there's also some bee behavior questions in the back, which is incredibly helpful. Like I'm seeing a whole bunch of bees crowding around the front entrance, or I'm seeing a whole bunch of bees on the ground in front of my hive that are dead or crawling around that can't fly. What does this mean? What does this mean? And those are really helpful because that's pretty much going to be what's going to make you want to rip your hair out. And Swarmstead said that Les Crowder has a pretty good book too. I'll have to check that one out because these are the only two big ones that I'm familiar with. But so your first year, you're kind of, a lot of the time you're going to want to rip your hair out because there's going to be all these weird things that you're seeing them do that nobody ever explains, that your instructor never talked about in class, and you don't know what it means, and you don't know if there's something you should be doing, or if they're just all going to die the next time you're out there because you didn't know what it meant. And so I think those bee behavior questions are a huge help. And, you know, it's like, where else are you going to put them? So it's nice that it just has that section in the back. That's actually probably one of the hardest things, I think, for beginner beekeepers. You can find almost anywhere, like, what the parts of the beehive are, or like bee biology. You don't really need that in the book. And then there's recipes for wax and lotions and honey. It's a little weird. His lotions recipes. I mean, I make and sell my lotions, and his body balm and skin cream have distilled water in them. And when you put distilled water in your lotions, that automatically adds a shelf life to your lotion of about 6 months or less. So I don't really know why he's using those lotion recipes. There's lots of lotion recipes you can use that don't require distilled water, and the shelf life is years. I mean, I've made lotions years ago and they're still good. And because a little bit goes a long way. So you don't really want lotion that has a short shelf life. He has a weird take on small hive beetles. He says to destroy any beetles you see during an inspection. And as somebody who lives in a place where there's an enormous amount of small hive beetles because of the lack of frost here, man, if I did that, I'd be wasting a ton of time. There's definitely, I wouldn't be spending 40 hours a year inspecting my hive if I tried to kill every small hive beetle I saw. And talks about medicating may be necessary with checkmate, which I've never heard of anyone using checkmate to deal with small hive beetles. So those were a few odd things, and you know, I didn't read the thing cover to cover, but really I'm just not a huge fan of how they breeze through the varroa mite and the overwintering sections, but they go into so much detail on how to rear queens. Which is like great, but not exactly something you need to know in order for your hive to survive and do well. So those are the two main books, and you'll see like there's a really pretty book, a coffee table book. It's hard, like a hardcover, and it's got a nice illustrative cover. I think it's called like the Beekeeper's Bible or something. That is not a how-to on beekeeping. It's a great book. It's really beautifully made. But a lot of those books, they just give you the basics on beekeeping, and they breeze through most of it. Those aren't handbooks. These two are the two main handbooks that I've seen that I recommend. And honestly, I think the Beekeeping for Dummies is the best. At the very least, you can read it, whereas the Beekeeper's Handbook is incredibly dry and a lot of bullet points. But if you're seeing a beekeeping book that's claiming to teach you how to keep bees and it's under 300 pages, it's not going to teach you how to keep bees. And finally, I wouldn't read a book to learn how to keep bees and that's it. I would still shadow somebody, take a class, whether online or in person, or at the very least supplement the books with a lot of YouTube videos, because they're not showing you what to do, especially when it comes to inspecting and understanding like what you're looking at in the hive. For that, you need to see it. And these books are really just guides. to bring you with you out to the hives or to reference when you have a problem. So Happy New Year, everybody, and see you next year.